A question I get asked a lot is whether I would recommend a 4K monitor over an ultrawide monitor for gaming. This is an interesting one and there is a bit of personal preference to it, but I kind of want to run down the main pros and cons of each in this video, so do stick around. So let's start off with 4K since it's the one that I have next to me anyway. This one is actually a fairly cheap 4K monitor. It's the AOC U2879VF. It's around about £300, at least at the time of filming. It's TN, but does have AMD's FreeSync, so if you are gaming on an AMD card, something like a Vega 64, then that could be a very nice experience for you. Now, with 4K, obviously you have great pixel density, especially with the smaller panels like this 28-inch one. It's certainly something that you might have, you want to put some scaling on unless you're comfortable sitting fairly close to the monitor for your general kind of productivity workloads, but for gaming, it's a very nice experience. Now, you can get higher end monitors than this. You can get IPS 4K displays, you can get high refresh rate 4K displays now from people like ASUS, and you can also obviously get G-Sync as well if you're an NVIDIA user. And of course, speaking of NVIDIA, you're gonna want a fairly high-end card. Now, Vega 64 will do just fine with this, especially on sort of medium-high settings, but if you want to go kind of balls to the walls, ultra setting gaming with high refresh rates, then you're gonna want something like the new RTX 2080 Ti, which is a pretty big hole in your pocket after the pretty big hole in your pocket from the high refresh rate 4K monitor. Now, of course, if you're someone who has a 1080 or a 2080 Ti, then, 4K gaming is probably going to be fairly within reach of you. Now, of course, if you have something like a 1080 or a 1070, then you can still game at 4K with those cards, but you will have to turn the settings of your games down in terms of, kind of medium to low in some cases, depending on what game you're playing, if you want an enjoyable and playable experience. On the other hand, with an ultrawide monitor, especially the 3440 by 1440 displays, you can often get fairly high refresh rates at relatively cheaper prices, especially compared to a standard sort of 16:9 4K display anyway. With those, for example, the AOC monitor that I have downstairs, that's a 100Hz display. It's a NVA panel, so it's a little bit better than this TN, but obviously it's a bit more expensive than this one and isn't quite as nice as IPS, but there are a few IPS ultrawide displays from people like ASUS as well, although again, it's pretty high price tags on those. But either way, that is a very interesting experience, and generally you don't need as high power of a PC to run those. Obviously you're physically missing pixels and the kind of vertical axes compared to a standard 4K display, so it's a little bit easier to run. The other thing that I would mention with ultrawides is that unlike going from 1080p to 1440p to 4K, all of those are still 16:9 resolutions, which means that generally speaking, most games just render the same thing that you would see anyway, but in a higher quality. Whereas with an ultrawide display that's 21:9, you actually have a different aspect ratio, and means that generally speaking, you get a different gaming experience. You get a bigger field of view, you kind of, more, literally more screen real estate to use, and generally speaking, most games don't just zoom you in, they actually render out further. Now, there are some issues with 21:9 monitors in that regard. Some games will put all of your HUD UI full right out to the sides, which can make it a bit difficult and you have to kind of look around, but some games will still have it in the center, but then have just extra space. Some games kind of scale to the sides, so there are definitely some compatibility issues with that, but for games like Rainbow Six Siege, where you can actually get a bigger field of view and therefore, in theory, a bit of a competitive advantage as you can, cover a larger area without having to move your mouse, it's a pretty interesting value proposition. For things like racing games, I would personally recommend an ultrawide just because it gives you a more of an immersive experience. A lot of the 34-inch 3440 by 1440 ultrawide monitors are curved as well, which again gives you a very nice and very immersive experience, and especially if you have a racing wheel, then again that is just an incredibly immersive experience. And even if you can, if you're a baller and shell out for 3 of them, then you're literally wrapping it around your entire body, which is just kind of crazy. My general personal preference actually sits towards the ultrawide for gaming. There are a few downsides, as I said, things like the compatibility and where your HUD sits and all that sort of stuff. You also have kind of in terms of pricing for similar feature sets, generally speaking anyway, and I'm sure you'll find outliers in the comments, but generally speaking, the 4K monitors tend to be a little bit cheaper even for similar feature sets than an ultrawide. Most mostly just because of demand for 4K monitors is a little bit higher than ultrawides, but either way, that is my personal preference, my personal recommendation. I would mention though that if you are also planning on doing productivity, things like video editing or 3D modeling, then generally speaking, I would personally recommend a 4K monitor with just generally multiple monitors rather than an ultrawide, because while the ultrawides do provide an interesting user experience and a very interesting experience for gaming, they can be a little bit of an annoyance to deal with in the more productivity based applications. Of course, that is my thoughts though. I would definitely love to hear yours in the comments down below. Do you have an ultrawide? Are you an ultrawide user and you think that they're the best thing in the world? Have you tried an ultrawide and decided that multi-monitor or 4K or whatever else is better for you? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below, which one you'd prefer. I'll leave a couple links in the description down below to a few of the monitors like this one and the other AOC one that I've talked about in this video. So if you want to take a look at them and check out pricing when and where you watch this, then you can do that. If you want to support the channel and keep me making these videos on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday and live streams on Thursday basis, then you can check out all the links in the description. There's a merch link if you want to pick up t-shirts like this one or ones that aren't TechteamGB related designs. There's also a private internet access VPN link. It massively helps me out and I highly recommend it. It's something I use personally, and you can connect to like a load of different places. So if you want to pretend that you're in the USA or Israel, then you can do any of those things. So feel free to check that out. There's also Patreon and Amazon and Overclockers UK affiliate links, which also massively help me out, and thank you to anyone who uses those. If you want to check out the other videos, there are plenty over here for you, and of course you can take a look at that subscribe button if you're new to the channel as well, and feel free to turn on the notifications too. Otherwise, thanks for watching. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments down below, and we'll see you all in the next video.